Hello, welcome back to Outdoor Exploration. I'm Emily, and today I thought it would be fun to see a bunch of different types of ferns. Ferns are coming out all over the place. I'm here in a kind of field of bracken and with sword ferns all around, so I thought I'd talk about this. Sword ferns, if you turn them over, and many ferns, but sword ferns it's very obvious, you can see little tiny rows of spores. Actually, they're little clumps of spores, and then later in the summer, as they get bigger, they will open up and release all the spores into the air, and as you go through the forest you're kind of in clouds of the yellow, what looks like pollen, but it's actually fern spores. So that's an interesting thing. Sword ferns are interesting in that each of their leaves is actually coming from one little pointy spot on the stem, and then they have a little extra point that sticks up on the side, and that they grow in a big clump like this. They're not really edible to very many things, although deer sometimes nibble at them a little bit. Mostly they're like really tough, barky, dried leaves. So you wouldn't want to eat sword fern fiddleheads or anything. Bracken, on the other hand, many people eat it. The fiddleheads when they're tiny, as I showed last week. But this one is already quite open, and eventually they will grow up to be 4 to 5 feet tall with huge big fronds, usually like a group of 3 fronds sticking out, and this whole area will be completely covered in these big fluffy fronds. And as you can see, they grow individually instead of in clumps. So that's 2 different types, and I am going to go find you some others right now. Hopefully over here. So here I have 2 different types of ferns that are not as common as sword ferns, but pretty common in the forest, and also look rather similar when they're coming up in the spring. This is a spiny wood fern, and this is a lady fern. They're both incredibly young, so they're very, very tender and soft, but both of them will get to be about this big, kind of half the size of a sword fern, and both of them have edible fiddleheads, really tiny ones, earlier in the year. And the main way that you can see the difference between them, well, maybe 2 ways. I find that the spiny wood fern is kind of more lacy looking than the lady fern over here. But also, I'm going to pick a lady fern stem and hold it right beside a spiny wood fern and show you that a lady fern starts off small and gets bigger and then pointier. And a spiny wood fern, oops, come apart there. The spiny wood fern starts off wide and then gets narrower. So it's more like a triangle shape, the frond, and this is more like, I don't know, what would you call that, a feather shape maybe? So, this is a lady fern and a spiny wood fern. And they are pretty much all over the west coast here. Look what we found! It's bucket land! Apparently this one is on top of a fern. I don't even know if I can get it off. There must be at least 10 or 15 old galvanized buckets here, along with maybe 20 or 30 broken bottles, and makes you wonder why people drag their garbage in, and all the same type of garbage, just in here off the parking lot to Crippen Park. The discoveries you make when exploring. Hey, I'm still close to the trail in Crippen Park, well, like 2 feet from the trail, and I have found a whole lot of Fringe Cup. And I'm showing you now because it looks like it's just about to come into bloom. And you can recognize it by these leaves. They're not all having buds right now, but this one is. And what will happen is it will have a kind of arc with little fringed cup flowers on it. They're extremely pretty, so we can keep a watch for them in the coming week. And of course, all kinds of miner's lettuce and all so many things here. So I said I was looking for licorice ferns, and I found a whole maple grove over here, and all of them have licorice ferns on them. That is the most likely place you will find licorice ferns, is on a maple tree. And you can also find them on mossy bluffs. They like to grow in this particular moss especially. And we call them licorice ferns because, as I've mentioned a week or two ago, you can pull the roots out very, very carefully without ripping the moss off and use them to make tea. They're licorice flavored. Also, you can identify licorice ferns mainly by the fact that they're growing on maple trees, but also because the leaflets are all attached to the stem. So like the whole way along, not just from the little leaflet stem. They're completely attached. So that would be different from the sword fern, which I showed you earlier was separated. Oh, look at this. So I have just remembered to say that I often find spiny wood ferns growing on old stumps. I don't know if that's where they always want to grow, but it is definitely an easy place to find them. There are, I don't know, at least 10 of them around this one. Old logs also. And around this side, we finally have deer fern. So these are last year's spore stems, which, or fertile stems, I suppose they should be called. You can see a deer fern has long fronds that are sort of similar to a sword fern fronds in that they're dark and shiny. But similar to the licorice fern, each leaflet is actually attached along the whole side of itself too, instead of just on the little stem like the sword fern. And they're also smaller. I hope you can see this. This is a mature sword fern stem, and it's maybe twice as long as this and 4 times as wide. This is a mature deer fern stem. They also have, oh, I already said that about the leaves being attached, but anyway, and these would be the fertile stems that come up. So in the summer, these have all little curly green leaves. Right now it's just dry, and that would be where you'd find the spores in the summer. And presumably there are some down there getting ready to grow, but I don't see them at the moment. Anyway, so this is a deer fern. So here we are next to a creek, and I have found a bunch of little maidenhair ferns. These are quite young. They will get much taller and bigger, but you can already see the shape of them, which is basically a circle of little fronds radiating out from the middle. And as my mother taught me when I was younger, you can easily recognize them by their black stems and by the fact that they really like to grow over a creek. Okay, so that is it for ferns today. There are more ferns out there, and I hope you get out exploring and find something interesting. See you next time.